It is June 16th, 2021. I'm Pandit Wright, and I will be conducting a virtual oral history narrative interview with Dr. Joseph Norman Yearwood III on behalf of DC Oral History Collaborative and Asbury United Methodist Church. Dr. Yearwood will be focusing on parts of his extraordinary life of service and commitment within Asbury and without, and what it's like to be a native Washingtonian. We are grateful that you have agreed to do this, Dr. Yearwood. I know that these reflections will benefit not only the archives of Asbury, but future visitors to the People's Archive of the DC Public Library. Thank you so very much.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here.
All right, thank you. So we're going to start at the very beginning. You were born in Howard University Hospital that was then known as Freedman's Hospital, but you began school in Brooklyn, New York. Can you tell us how old you were in Brooklyn and what your first memories were of that experience?
Okay, I began school in Brooklyn, New York. I, my sister, and one of my cousins, we lived in New York with our grandparents. And my grandfather was a Methodist minister, and we began school there because of the segregation in the schools of the District of Columbia. We began school in New York City, in Brooklyn. And I attended the kindergarten, first and second grades in Brooklyn, New York.
What was it like?
And PS 138.
What was that like?
It was interesting. I remember there was a lot of conflict between the Blacks and the Puerto Ricans. So there was a lot of conflict during that period of time. I also remember we could hear the baseball games from Ebbets Field. And so that's why I'm still today a Brooklyn Dodgers fan. And, you know, being that young, I certainly wasn't aware of a lot of other things going on around me, but it was an enjoyable time. It was an enjoyable time. And I have a lot of good memories about beginning school in Brooklyn.
What year was that?
Oh my goodness, that was probably 1950.
So do you recall the nature of the conflict between the Puerto Ricans and the Blacks?
I'm not sure why they couldn't get along, but I don't know whether it was territorial. We lived in Bedford-Stuyvesant, and I'm not sure what the root of the controversy was.
Was it a safe environment for you? You were living with your grandparents, your grandfather was a minister, and you say it was a pleasant environment. Is there any one story that you would like to share with us about those days?
Well, we had a close-knit family. My grandmother had a sister that lived nearby. And so we would move between the two houses with regards to visiting and having meals and being able to communicate and fellowship with one another.
You shared a story with me about a woman who put some nails down in the street. Can you tell us that one?
Okay, that's when I had come back to Washington, DC to live with my parents. We lived on B Street, which is now known as Constitution Avenue. And we used to ride our bikes around the block. We used to ride on the sidewalk in those days. And there was a lady who lived, I think it was on Maryland Avenue. And so she apparently did not want us to ride past her home, and she would put tacks and nails out so that we would puncture our tires. Now, I don't ever remember having a punctured tire, but I remember that. I remember her.
That would be your first moment, your first recollection of anything like the segregation that your parents had been concerned about when they moved you to Brooklyn?
I would say yes, yes.
What do you recall most vividly about transferring to Parkview Elementary School in Columbia Heights? Was it easier or was it harder than what you had been used to?
The one thing that, well, one of the things that I remember that sticks out in my mind is that when I came to, when I transferred to Parkview, I think it had to do with penmanship I was always very good with my penmanship, but there was something that I can't remember whether it was something I had learned in New York or something that I learned when I came to the district, but there was a significant contrast, and I can't recall exactly what it was. But I do have another story about Parkview that I did not personally experience, but certainly one of my classmates told me about it, and that was Parkview at one time was segregated. And there was, in '54, it must have been, when the schools were supposed to be desegregated, when the parents actually had to march up to the school and demand that their children be admitted. And at that point, I think the Caucasians or the non-Blacks decided that they would move. And I think that was maybe the beginning of the, what they call, I think, the white flight or something of that nature to the suburbs. But the school principal had mandated that they would have the students there. The parents did not agree, but the Black parents were steadfast and saw to it that the students were able to attend that school.
Did it bother you? Did you know about that bad feeling?
No, I didn't. I was not familiar with that. No.
And then you transferred to another elementary school. That was just so it was easier to get to from your house?
Well, that was in the neighborhood. And that, again, that was Job Bonnet Elementary School, which had been an all-white school. That was closer to home. And by that time, we had moved up to Upper Northwest. We had moved from Capitol Hill up to Upper Northwest, and Barnard Elementary School was the nearest elementary school.
And then your path took you on from there to McFarland Junior High and ultimately Roosevelt Senior High School. I've heard other Native Washingtonians talk about how in the day there weren't many choices for young people to go to as far as high school. Did that impact you at all?
No, when I came along, I would say no. Now, I have an older sister who went to Dunbar, and as you probably know, Dunbar is a renowned, it's known across the country for the students that it has turned out and for its academic excellence. She, as a matter of fact, both of my parents attended Dunbar and my older sister, but I went to Roosevelt. That was the nearest school. My sister is 3 years older than I am, so I think Dunbar was probably her best choice at that time, although she did have friends that went to Roosevelt.
And you enjoyed Roosevelt?
I did.
And then you went on to Morgan State, where you pledged Kappa.
Yes.
Now, you told me earlier you always knew you were going to pledge Kappa because of the image that, that they had in your community. Can you talk about that a bit?
Okay, when I was in high school, we had a fraternity known as Kappa Alpha Omega. And we decided that we would fashion ourselves behind the men of Kappa Alpha Psi. We looked up to them. We always felt that they were sharp, they were intelligent, they were community service oriented. And so this is the path that we thought we wanted to take. And so we came together as a fraternity. We also had, now most of our members did attend Roosevelt, but we had members at McKinley and Spingarn, and we also had a sister organization, and those young ladies attended Spingarn, McKinley, Eastern, for the most part. And we would have monthly meetings, and our parents, of course, were our chaperones. And so we had a lot of various activities, social activities and things along the way. But that was an exciting time of growing up and as a teenager.
What was it like being a teenage boy in Washington, DC at that time?
Well, I would say that personally, I did not realize a lot of the bigotry. So of course, I experienced some, but I would say that it wasn't as overt as others may have experienced. I sometimes say that maybe I was a little sheltered. But along the way, I did have certain experiences being called certain names, and but for the most part, it was an easy, life was pleasant. Life was pleasant.
Who called you names?
Well, members of the other race, they would ride by in the car and they would use the N word, and
At school or at your house or just in general?
Just in general, just in general.
And your parents, how did they help you experience this?
Well, my father, I would say, he was the ultimate diplomat. He always would take the high ground, you might say, or he would always find a way to mediate situations and to maintain harmony. And so, again, we didn't really get the brunt of what was actually happening in society. I know that he worked for the government, and a lot of times he had to travel, and he would share some of his experiences and some of the restrictions and some of the safety things, the kinds of things that he would have to do to remain safe. But personally, I can't say that I experienced a lot of the hardships that some other folks may have experienced.
What do you think life would have been like if you never moved back to DC? What impact do you think being a native Washingtonian has on the way you do things?
If I had never moved back to DC, that's interesting. I think we all kind of know about life in New York, the pace, and basically, I would say the mentality or the philosophy of New Yorkers.
No, compare that for us, and don't let it bother you that I grew up in New York as you speak about that.
I think I've always enjoyed DC. I've always been very, very proud of being from Washington, because one of the reasons is because, I think it's unique. There are not many native Washingtonians around, and everyone's is always very surprised when you say that you're a native Washingtonian. You were born in Washington. But I know I have a lot of classmates that graduated and moved to New York, and that's always been an attraction to a lot of people. If you like that pace, and of course, at one time, and sure, even today, there's a lot of opportunities available in New York if you like that kind of pace. I don't know that I can really compare the two, having lived in New York at such a young age, and having most of my teen years and young adult years and adult years in Washington. I don't know if I can make a fair comparison as to how things may have been if I had stayed in New York.
I understand. You have said that your father is the only man you ever wanted to be like. When did you come to admire him as other than Dad?
Well, my father has always been a leader in the church. He he did hold just about every position in the church that a layman can hold. Various committees and other missions that are available in the church. He also was president of the United Methodist Men for about 10 years. He initiated a lot of different programs while he led them. He's been a lay leader. He's been on the official board. Again, holding just about every position in the Methodist Church, in the United Methodist Church, that a layperson can hold. And not only that, he also was very, very active in the Masonic order. And here again, in that order, he always ascended to the highest positions. And so the respect and the admiration that people have shown for him, I've always been aware of that. And so this is something that I would aspire to.
What things did he do that you wanted to imitate?
The way he carried himself, the way he dressed, his ability to converse and to make people feel good. Again, he, I believe, was a diplomat in terms of bringing people together and mediating situations, and just the comfort that people felt being around him and how they would confide in him, and just his leadership ability.
Your mom was a hard worker in Asbury Church also, is that right?
She attended Asbury. She did not participate in a lot of activities within the church. Her focus, besides raising the family, was with the Eastern Star. And she too, in the Masonic family, as well as in the Eastern Star, which is of course a part of the Masonic family, there are what we call different houses. And in each of the houses, they both ascended to the top position in those particular houses.
So we'll come back to the Masonic order a bit later. Let me ask you this. Aside from your mom and dad, growing up in Asbury, who else was a great influence on you in the church?
Well, we had Reverend James D. Foy, a pastor. Actually, the first pastor when I came to Asbury was Robert Moulton Williams. And Reverend Foy followed him, and I remember we used to have annual picnics, and Reverend Foy would actually play ball with us. So I remember that. He was a baseball player. And there was a Mr. James Chambers, who was the soccer coach at Howard. And he would have the Boy Scouts come over to the gym and swim. There was a Mr. Daniels who was involved with the Boy Scouts. Mr. Garnett Hammond was involved with the Boy Scouts. He's another great Dunbar alumnus. Miss Alice Boone Carr. She was the head of the Altar Boys, which are now called Acolytes. She was head of the Altar Boys, and she was quite a popular lady. But she headed up the Altar Boys for a number of years and did a great job. She loved the young men and took good care of us with regards to letting us know what we needed to do and keeping us in line, so to speak, making sure that we did the kinds of, provide the service that we need to provide. And she would also have us travel, do a little traveling to other churches. And for whatever reason, she would always call on me to have remarks when we did these visiting. So I remember her quite well.
Asbury, it seems like it's always been a big, important part of your life. When you moved back from Brooklyn to DC, were your parents already Asbury members?
Yes.
And so you came to this church as soon as you returned here?
Yes.
And you then became an altar boy. Were you a Boy Scout as well? You just mentioned the Boy Scouts a lot.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
We also participated in the Methodist Youth Fellowship, which used to meet on Sunday evenings at the church. And that was a time for socialization, fellowship, and so forth.
When you think about some of those people that had influence on you, is there anything that anyone said that you still remember that has formulated some of your actions during these years?
I don't know that I can recall any direct quotes, but I'm sure that they each imparted some pearls of wisdom to us. I just can't recall exactly, but we had some heavy hitters, I would say, at Asbury. Always have through the years. And Asbury is, when they say it's a historical edifice, not only the building, but the people who have come through Asbury have been quite prominent in their contributions to society.
All right, we'll come back to Asbury, but can you share a little bit of your journey after you went off to Morgan? You ultimately became a physical therapist. That's why we're calling you Dr. Yearwood. Can you talk about some of the choices that you made after you got to Morgan?
At Morgan, I was a physical education major, and I also was in the advanced ROTC program. And as a physical education major, I was in the educational curriculum. And when time for graduation came around, Vietnam was very big, or it was quite prominent at that time. And during my junior and senior year, you go away to summer camp for the ROTC, and every day you have what they call maneuvers. It can be on a squad, platoon, company, battalion level, but you have maneuvers and objectives to accomplish against the enemy every day. So I realized at that point that I could not duck what I couldn't see. I remember going out at night and you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. And so I decided, now I know some veterans are going to throw rocks at me, but I decided that I'd rather go to graduate school, because when I graduated, I received a commission, as a second lieutenant, and I would have gone directly in the service, and I would have gone to Vietnam. There was no question about that. And many of my buddies did go to fight in Vietnam, and some of them did not come back, and some of them that did come back have some residual effects. So I decided to go to graduate school, and I chose physical therapy because that curriculum, or the curriculum that I had completed, had just about all of the prerequisite courses. And so I went into physical therapy.
Had you known anything about physical therapy before this happened?
I began to learn about it probably in my senior year.
And did it suit you?
Yes, it did. Yes, it did.
Why so?
Mainly because I enjoy helping people, and that's certainly an opportunity to do just that, to improve the lives of other individuals. And I saw that as an opportunity to do that, and to enjoy, the having learned about the body and how the body functions, and all of the various parts and systems that come together to make one a functioning being, was very, very interesting. And so I really am very happy that I chose that field, and I have enjoyed practicing physical therapy.
Where did you do your work? Did you stay at Morgan, or you moved to another institution?
No, I went to, when I left Morgan, I went to Case Western Reserve University, and I got a master's in physical education, and then I went to the University of Iowa. and completed my physical therapy curriculum.
Did you like the Midwest?
I love the Midwest. I almost stayed out there. It was fresh air. The terrain was level. The food was good. The people were pleasant. Iowa has a lot of history, and one of the things, besides, of course, studying while I was out there, to bring up Kappa again, the third chapter of Kappa was chartered at University of Iowa. And while I was in Iowa, there were about 8 or 9 graduate brothers there. And the chapter had been inactive for a number of years. And we came together and got together with the national headquarters, and we were successful in reactivating that chapter of Gamma. It was Gamma chapter, the third chapter. And so that's one of the things that brings back memories as far as Iowa is concerned. But Iowa, Big Ten school, it was like you could probably fit the whole population at that time into the stadium. And it was a college town. It was a college town. It was open. There were, people didn't lock their doors. It was very interesting. It was very interesting. I really liked it out there. Yes.
Did you experience any challenges being African-American?
Interestingly enough, no. As a matter of fact, I understand that's some roots of KKK from that territory, but I have to say no, I did not. Everyone was very, very friendly, interestingly enough.
And so what prompted you to return to the district?
Well, I guess I've always wanted to come home. I always wanted to get back home, and my first job was where I was born. So I came back to Washington and started working. Mm-hmm.
So while you were gone, it seems like your leadership abilities were being used, the things that had been nurtured in Asbury, I would say. And you've been coached to speak, as you said, by Miss Alice when she had you out on the road. Have you always felt like a leader? Were you pushed into it more than wanting to go?
I'd like to say that I'd like to believe that I've been able to rise to the occasion. I don't know that it's something that I've ever really saw. Well, I can't say that because when I look at the organizations that I belong to, everyone joins organizations for a different reason and they have different goals. And as I think back, the ones that I've joined, I would say that, yes, I have aspired to be one of the leaders as opposed to just a dues-paying member. So I'd like to think I've been able to rise to the occasion and make some positive inroads in the various organizations that I belong to.
Did you stay connected to Asbury while you were away?
When I came home, whenever I came home, I would attend. But I know that when I first graduated, when I first started working, rather, I was a workaholic. And so I actually used to work on Sundays, Saturdays and Sundays during the week also. And so a lot of times, no, I did not attend the church service.
But you still were a Christian man. When did you join the United Methodist Men?
I joined probably, I would say, in the 90s. I would say in the 90s. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And were you active in Asbury in other ways at that time, or was this your first organization that you joined within the church?
Well, at that time, I had been secretary for the finance committee. I had been financial secretary. I had been chair of finance, the chairman of finance committee, and I had been involved in other committees. I had been on it at that time. It was called the official board. At one time, it was called the administrative board. The term today is the church council. So yes, I had been involved in some other activities and committees.
And for the United Methodist Men, did you go in as the president, or were you elected after having served a while?
When I joined the United Methodist Men, we had we had probably at least a half a dozen different groups. And I believe the origin of the groups was based on neighborhoods where the members lived. There came a time, and so I was in group 9, and at one time I was the chairman of group 9. But there came a time when, because of attrition, the groups got smaller and smaller, and it was more difficult for them to sustain themselves. So we would have our individual meetings each month, and then also each month we would have the whole body, the parent organization, or members from all the organizations meet. And at one of those meetings, we decided we would merge into one. And that's how we are today, one body. And we tried to maintain some of the activities that, what you might call the signature activities of each group. For an example, one used to have a sweetheart ball, one used to have a prayer breakfast, one used to have a scholarship program. We've tried to maintain some of those activities, but we're now one body now.
Was your father still active in the United Methodist Men when you became involved?
He rejoined, I would say, in later years. He did in the 90s. He did rejoin, become involved, attend the meetings. And
were you meeting in homes, or were you meeting at the church?
No, we would meet at church. At one time, at one time we did meet at the members' homes, and that's, I always like to talk about how I became involved, and that is, I believe Mr. Richard Nero was the president at this particular time, and the meeting was at another past president's home, Albert Dixon. And so I was invited, and I attended. And I always say that it wasn't necessarily what transpired at the particular meeting in terms of the business and so forth and so on. It was a smorgasbord that Miss Gloria Dixon laid out for us that made me decide to join. So I've been active ever since then. And Brother Dixon, who has now passed away, has always been a great supporter of mine, as was Brother Nero, and all the gentlemen that past and present have always been very, very supportive.
Can you tell us something about the history of United Methodist Men as an organization? Is it a national organization? How does it work? What do they stand for? Well,
one of the main reasons, or not reasons, but the purpose of United Methodist Men is to have men committed to having Christ as the center of their life, what we call the centrality of Christ in your life. And our purpose is to really, well, one of our purposes is to mentor the young men. Some of the men's groups have Boy Scouts groups that they sponsor. And at one time, Asbury did have a very vibrant Boy Scout group. I think it was Scout 542, troop number 542, I believe it was. And, but the idea now, some of the churches have United Men's groups and some don't. There's also a national office in Tennessee that provides support and supplies for us. But there are national conventions, there the United Methodist Men are also divided into districts. We are in the Baltimore, Washington Conference, and we have various activities from time to time that includes the local members, and then we have the conference level, and then we have the national jurisdictional conferences as well.
And how long have you been president now? I'm sorry.
Okay, I've been president since since 2013. 2013.
Has United Methodist Men, has your organization always been the sponsor of Asbury's Men's Day?
Yes, yes, yes.
That's just what you do.
That's one of the things that we do.
The most recent Men's Day at Asbury was a wonderful service. Your theme, Proponents of Social Justice. Where did that come from?
Well, social justice right now is something that I think we all should be and probably are aware of when we look at the events of, well, that's something that's been a theme that has resonated forever. But I think it has come to more of a front burner now when we look at the events of the last 12, 18 months or so, and the things that have happened to people, both from a standpoint of police brutality, some of the even gentrification, all the kinds of things that have impacted the well-being of our citizens. We want to be sure that everyone has equal access to the resources that are available, and that we want to begin to try and get to the decision-making table so that we can be involved in this policy-making procedures, so that we know that everyone is treated fairly, and that there's equal treatment across the board for everyone.
And to that end, you had a powerful speaker. You had Reverend Thomas Bowen of the Mayor's Office of Religious and Community Affairs. He said, you choose to use all your powers for good. It's up to you to choose the type of man you want to be. Do you recall making that choice?
Well, I think on a day-to-day basis, yes. We wake up in the morning and we think about what our day is going to consist of. We think about who we can impact, what good we can do for others, just what we want to accomplish on a daily basis. And I know for me, I'm about helping others. I think I know that part of my morning prayer is to improve myself and try to help someone else improve his or herself. And so that's a daily drive for me to be better the next day than I was the day before, and to try to help somebody.
When I think about leadership and what I have seen you do at the United Methodist Men, for example, I remember when you all sponsored the jazz concert a couple of years ago, yes. And I watched you from the audience just personally take hands-on action on every task, everything that needed to be done, to the point where I asked you, when were you going to stand up and sing? Did you always have that sense of detail and commitment? Are these things your parents instilled in you?
I would say that I've been told that I'm detail oriented, and I know that everyone has their own style and way that they think things should be conducted, or the way things should be put together. And it's not that I don't know how to delegate, but somehow I've always felt that if my signature is going to be on it, I want to be sure that things happen a certain way. And sometimes there's not a lot of help. You know, you indicated that you saw me moving about, doing this, that, and the other. Sometimes you don't always get as much help as you need. And so if you want to get it done, you sort of have to roll up your sleeves and do it yourself. And but I've enjoyed what I've done. And I appreciate all of the support that I've gotten along the way. But I've had a tendency to be more hands-on.
What keeps the flame going in a service activity like this?
Well, I seem to have gotten into I guess it's just me. I seem to go in the various organizations that I'm in. I seem to go from one project to another, and because I've done certain things, I've been called upon to, from time to time, for another project, and I just keep going. I mean, I just seem to go from one project to another, and I like seeing the end product. You know, I like starting at a certain point, gathering all of the details and resources and references that are required, and then going into the execution phase and seeing it come to fruition.
Is there a trend in the type of challenges that other United Methodist Men organizations are facing across the country that you're aware of?
I would think that the trend would be, and I'm certainly that it has to do with a particular environment or a particular location, but one of the challenges I would say is maintaining membership, increasing membership, having being able to market yourself, so to speak, to get men interested in participating in what it is you are doing. And of course, everyone wants to be with a winner. So, you know, you have to decide what it is, what is your niche, what is it you want to do? What can you offer this individual to influence them to come and participate with you? Right now at Asbury, I'm approaching the younger generation. I can say that in our group right now, the average age is probably, for those that are really active, the average age is probably over 70. Not probably, it is over 70. And so my thrust right now is to draw in some of or as many of the younger men as I can. And I'm talking about the age group of 30s and 40s. And you probably noticed that in our Men's Day program this past Sunday, we had some youth, and they are each about 15 years old. And so that's another segment. And I know that at church, we do have a young adult mission, but I'd like to be able to draw from that pool as well to get them ready to move into these positions. And I'm talking about succession, succession planning and so forth, so that our organization and the church will continue to thrive.
Let's talk about the Masonic Order now. I watched the YouTube video and slideshow that was done at Asbury. It was celebrating the 142nd anniversary of Warren Lodge number 8 in 2013. On that service, it ended with a clip of an amazing and emotional speech by Reverend Shockley, a former pastor at Asbury UMC. Please tell us what else was so special about that day.
Okay, the Anniversary Divine Service is a service that's held by each lodge in our jurisdiction. in our jurisdiction, we have the Prince Hall, the most worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge, and there are 25 subordinate lodges, and Warren Lodge is one. So each year, each lodge will have an anniversary and divine service, at which time they celebrate their anniversary as well as acknowledge those members who have passed on since during that previous year. So at Asbury, I think it was September 23rd, 2013, or something of that nature, I had the privilege of having my anniversary, or my lodge's anniversary in divine service at Asbury. We did, as you say, have a speaker to bring the message, Dr. Shockley. That's a request I had made of Dr. Shockley prior to his being reassigned. And fortunately, Reverend Dr. Mills did agree to have him to come in and to do that service. One of the significant things for me was that my father in 1952 had also been master of our lodge, and he held his anniversary divine service at Asbury. And the way that the services are handled with regards to the processional and the various items that are brought into the church and how the men are attired, it's a little different now than it was when my father did it. But when I became master of my lodge, I went to my Grand Master and I asked him if I could conduct my service the same way that my dad had. And fortunately, he enabled me to do that. So my procession was like my dad had, which was with the top hat, the arching by the wardens, and all of the ceremony that was conducted during that period of time. So I was really appreciative that I was able to have that event, and as I like to say, do it the way my daddy did it. So that was you might say, a high time for me during that year.
Let's talk more about the order itself and how many generations of Yearwoods have served.
My dad was the first to be in the Masonic order, and then I came along many years later. My dad was a very young man when he started, and so again he rose to the top position of each of the various houses that he was in, and the top of the Masons is the Most Worshipful Grand Master, and he served that office 1971 and 1972. And again, he had his, for the Grand Lodge, he had his anniversary divine service at Asbury. So I'm second generation.
What is the importance of ritual to you? You belong to organizations that have a certain level of ritual. We've talked about the importance of presentation and image and what all of that means. Why do you hold it so sacred?
Each of the organizations has a prescribed, you may say, ritual that has a lot of meaning. And as we journey through these various organizations, it's all about getting what we call knowledge, acquiring light, and becoming more and more familiar with ourselves and with the world around us. And so each step along the way, there's more enlightenment. And these rituals that we participate in provide this light.
And can you talk about some of the work you're most proud of that you've done during your time with the order?
We do a lot of community service activities. We do a lot of work with the youth. We have a youth organization known as the Knights of Pythagoras, and it's a mentorship group, and we participate with them in various activities, that not only social activities but things that add to their growth and development as young men. We sponsor various activities for them, and they have their own ritual, they have their own ceremonies that they participate in, and they are many of the things that we do is simulated in their particular organizations. So most of our work is charitable in nature, but there is a lot in terms of opportunities for growth and development, not only, of the individual members as well. And of course, there's the camaraderie, there's the fellowship, there's the brotherhood that we share. And so that's all very important.
Can you give an example of one of the types of development activities for young people that you are proud of?
Well, we bring speakers in for different subjects. It might be financial literacy. It might be how to conduct yourself if you are stopped by the police. We talk about social skills, etiquette, all those kinds of things that you need to know about in order to just get along in life. Those are some of the things that we share with them.
Let's talk about the District of Columbia. You moved to Maryland in 1995, but did that have any effect on you continuing to think of yourself as a Washingtonian?
Well, I'll always be a Washingtonian, regardless of where I live. But it's a little disheartening to see what's happening with our city, all the various changes that are taking place, and of course you like to see change and you hope that changes for the better. But I don't feel that the citizens of DC are getting a good deal, a good shake. You know, there's this thing about voter not being able to, not having, being considered a state, but yet being involved in terms of having to pay taxes and all that kind of thing. And then we look at what's going on with this gentrification and how for many, many years the city was neglected in terms of some of the neighborhoods, how they were not kept up or not, funds were not made available to rebuild the city. And then all of a sudden, these developers come along, and you know, that's another subject with regards to the politics involved there. But we all know that what's going on right now and what the real estate market and is like and so forth.
You mentioned recently taking your grandson to see the house where you were up on B Street, Constitution Avenue. Why did you do that?
Well, we were in the neighborhood. And I wanted him to know. I thought it'd be, you know, I always like to listen to my dad tell stories and about things that he did when he was growing up. And so I thought it would be of interest to him to know that. And as a matter of fact, this past Memorial Day, I had him to go with me as I visited the burial sites of some of our relatives. And I had him to write down who was there and what the relationship was and so forth and so on. Because I think it's important that they know, when I say they, our children, our grandchildren know about who our ancestors were and where they are and so forth.
As you walked in your neighborhood, what are some of the changes that you pointed out to him?
Oh, the building itself has taken on a new face. It's not it's not the same. I'm sure the configuration inside is pretty much the same in terms of how the various apartments are located, but the front is completely different. Also, I mentioned to him that there was a great big house right next door that a family that we knew lived in, and now that is another, I think it's another condo now. And there was a store on the corner, which is now a condo. And so the housing situation, or the housing in that area, has changed quite a bit.
Does that create a different feeling, a different vibe, as they might say?
Yes, it does. It does. It does. It's completely different from what I knew it to be. Mm-hmm.
Can you share with us some of your other memories of just the feel of life in DC when Howard Theater and Florida Avenue and all of that were in its peak? What was it like?
Well, Florida Avenue and U Street were the areas that many of us, and actually my parents and their peers, those were the areas where all the nightlife and a lot of the activities, the pool halls, the theaters, and all those kinds of things, that's where they existed. Now, Howard University, not Howard University, but Howard Theater, of course, I visited there many times. That's where all of your entertainers would come, all the entertainers from Motown and the rock and roll. That's where they would come. There were 3 movie theaters on U Street: the Republic, the Booker T, and the Lincoln. I think that the Lincoln is the only one that's still there. The pool halls on U Street. I remember going to the barber shop there on U Street between 14th and 15th Street. Haircut was $1. And that's now a great big high-rise building. It was right across the street from what used to be the funeral home, Jarvis Funeral Home, and that's now a bank, I believe. So U Street obviously has changed significantly. It still has some restaurants and some commercial entities there, but it has changed. Lee's Florist is still there. They've been there for many, many years. And of course, the Masonic Temple is there at the corner of 10th and U. And that's a mainstay there that has been there for many, many years.
Do you participate in services there, in ceremonies there?
Oh yes, yes. That's where we have our meetings. Yes, at the Masonic Temple.
Going back then to those teenage years, how did you get down to U Street? If it was a big old Saturday night or something like that, how did you proceed to get there? And what was it like to just stroll around and participate?
We probably rode the streetcar, as I remember. If we didn't walk, we rode the streetcar.
Where were you living by that time?
Let me see. By this time, I was living on Varnum Street. We call it on the hill, up on the 300 block of Varnum Street, and yeah, in Northwest Washington. Mm-hmm.
So you would take the streetcar, or you might walk.
Right.
A crowd of people, or just usually you and maybe a buddy?
Just a couple of people. Just a couple of people. Or we would ride our bikes, and you know, we go down and hang out for a while. Another entity that has been there, still there, is the hot dog place.
Chili Bowl.
Chili Bowl, yes, the Chili Bowl, yes. So that's been around for a long, long time.
I'm trying to get a visual of what this time was like. So as you rode your bicycle, you would get into town. What kind of time of day was a good time to get there?
Early afternoon. Now, as a teenager, I wasn't down there a lot in terms of the nightlife. That was my younger adult years. But so as a teenager, no, I wasn't down there a lot for the nightlife or the bustling of the evening, you might say. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You go for a hot dog. What did you do with your bicycle?
That's a good question. I remember it was red and white. I don't recall what. I know I can remember how happy I was when I first got it for Christmas, and I had to start with training wheels, and then training wheels came off, and you couldn't tell me anything.
You would just go down there with it, and you would just leave it anywhere? Were you able to feel safe about parking a bike in those days?
Well, you had to watch your bike. You had to watch your bike. I remember one of my cousins had gotten an English racer. That was because my bike was an American-made bike, but he had an English racer, and he didn't keep it long because he left it outside, and he came back, it was gone. Mm-hmm.
All right. So when we think about city life in general, what would you like to see about changes? How would you like it to be approached? Things that could help the people who live in the District of Columbia now.
Affordable housing would be probably one of the main factors that should be addressed. And I don't know what the mayor's agenda calls for exactly, but and I think, as a matter of fact, she has advocated for affordable housing, but I'm not sure exactly what shape that is taking. It seems to me that the developers have been allowed to come in and take properties and redesign them and put edifices in place that the people who were there can't really afford to purchase or to live in. And so this seems to be a prominent throughout the city. And so I would say one of the main factors would be to see to it that people in the district are able to live in the district, able to remain in the district, and have housing that they can afford to live in comfortably.
I understand. Black Lives Matter. How did it compare for you to other movements you've known about or experienced?
Black Lives Matter, as we all know, I think came to the head with the killing of George Floyd and all the other killings of unarmed Black people that have taken place, mostly in the last, I would say, several years. Now, we know that if we look at history, we know that this is something that's always been going on, but because of the availability of video and cell phones and that kind of thing, that we have actually been able to document this and provide proof other than the spoken word. So with these atrocities that have taken place, Black Lives Matter has been a rallying cry, I would say, which has really been adopted by people across the entire spectrum, not only Black people, but I think there's a real appreciation for what has been going on, and there's a move afoot to make sure that these atrocities don't continue. And so it's about how we're going to deal with this police brutality and what policies are going to go into place to curb that or eliminate that, if that's possible. And but I think Black Lives Matter is very, very important. Now, you asked about as compared to some other movements. Of course, I remember when we had of course, the March on Washington, and we had the Poor People's Campaign. And when we had various protests at the universities and all those kinds of things, they were, I would say, important in their times, and I'm sure that they, to some extent, achieved what they were purposed for at that time. But many of the same issues that we dealt with then, we are dealing with now. And it's just an ongoing battle to have what we call life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness here in the United States. So it's, I just feel bad for the youngsters that are coming along now to still have to face these kinds of issues as they grow up and try to live a good life.
When we think about Black Lives Matter, did you ever have a chance to either see that sign in the street in person, or you saw the pictures on television? What was your reaction when you saw that?
You're speaking of the removal and the burning of the sign?
Well, you can talk about that as well. My first thing, I was thinking of going down there and seeing where Mayor Bowser had caused the sign to be, the Black Lives Matter logo to be in that major street.
I thought that was a pretty bold move. I thought that she was saying to the White House, "In your face," I thought it was pretty bold, but I think she made her point. She made her point, and I think most people appreciate that, what she did. And I think that'll be there for quite some time yet.
And the removal of Asbury's sign?
That was a direct affront to the members of the church. I think it was said that they didn't know that the church members were who they were, but that doesn't really matter. To go onto someone else's property and to destroy their property, I mean, that's, as Reverend Bowen said, poor excuses for men, who decided that they would have to do something like that to express their manhood. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You just wonder why, you wonder what they're thinking about.
The boldness of Asbury as well, and Reverend Mills, in putting that sign back up again and again and again sends a message. Thinking about Asbury and their place in history, how do you view Asbury's place in history?
I think that Asbury is renowned for always being in the forefront for social justice and for advocating for the rights of people, regardless of color. I think if you review Asbury's history, you'll see many individuals who were prominent in the struggle, so to speak, and who were members of Asbury. And I think Asbury has a reputation, not only United Methodist Men, United Methodist Women, but the church as a whole has a reputation of always standing up for what is right and for the rights of all people.
What do you think the impact of COVID has been on Asbury?
COVID, to some extent, has been quite a challenge, but I'm just amazed at the ingenious of the members of Asbury, our leadership, our senior pastor, and those that have been called upon to navigate us through this time, through these tremendous challenges. And like that, they have created such opportunities. And we talk about adjusting to the new normal. Well, I don't know that we really want to go back to what we consider to be normal, because I think there's a lot of good things happening right now, and they're going to happen, that are going to really enhance what we were doing or attempting to do. So I think that this COVID experience has created new possibilities and opportunities, and really given us an opportunity to shine. Yeah.
Can you talk, excuse me, can you talk more about that? The, excuse me, the challenges that Asbury is facing, and what we're doing to combat those challenges.
Okay, well, one is that being accustomed to coming together each Sunday to worship, to share stories and to fellowship, and just the feeling of being united there. Of course, that has not occurred for over a year now, but through the expertise and the knowledge and the abilities of our staff, of our leadership, they've put together a communications team and a virtual worship service team that has been tremendous. And they've also acquired the requisite equipment to be able to produce a worship service on a regular basis, weekly, that the congregation can continue to enjoy and feel some sense of unity. So the objectives and goals of our church have continued to thrive and to operate. And the congregation has been very, very supportive. I attend the church council meetings, and reports are that actually Asbury is in a good state. Now, we have some challenges in terms of the age of our building, and there are some renovations and repairs that need to be done. And right now we have a campaign to address that. But I would say that the future for Asbury is very, very bright, and COVID has played a big part in providing opportunities. What has come to can be seen as opportunities as opposed to setbacks.
What do you think is happening, excuse me, in the church? Not just Asbury, but in terms of youth, just being able to attract youth back into our setting. Do you think that's possible?
I think it's possible. It's something that I would say has to happen. And we have a young lady who is our chair of our youth ministry. And I know she's working very hard with the youth to keep them united and active, and to build that group. As I said, I'm certainly going to be talking to the young men at the various demographics within our church to get them involved, to get them into leadership positions. And I'm sure the United Methodist Women are going to be working with the young ladies as well. So there is going to be, or there is a thrust to get the youth more involved, because of course we know that that's really the future of our church. And so we really need to spend time and energy making sure that that happens.
In the district, was there some seminal event where people started moving away from the community that took young people away with them?
I can't say that there's any similar event. I would say that the younger generation, I think it's important that the church be able to meet the needs of its members. And when we see that maybe some of the youth have not followed in the footsteps of their parents, maybe there's something that was missing in the worship service, or something in the church that the youth did not appeal to the youth, or wasn't inviting to the youth. And so they sought their spiritual growth in other areas. But we have some families whose youngsters have continued their membership. We have some that have not.
There is an increasing appearance that people, when they've moved away, they didn't come back, some of them, and they're more focused on some of the churches or donating, for instance, to the schools and organizations that are in their neighborhoods. Do you think this also ties to your desire to see affordable housing in the District of Columbia?
Yes, I think that when they have moved away, it also depends on proximity. I mean, some of the folks, many of the members of Asbury don't live in the district, and so they travel a good distance to come in on Sunday morning. And many of them pass any number of churches on the way in, and so there might be a tendency to maybe not want to come that distance every morning or every once a week, and just participate at a church that's closer by.
Which in a way has probably also been one of the results of, excuse me, of COVID, that you're able to worship whenever and however you want to. It will be interesting to see the hybrid maybe version of church in the future. You're optimistic, though, you've said, about what that future looks like for Asbury.
Oh yes, oh yes. Right now, there is a plan for reopening, and there is a survey that has gone out to get the response from the congregation to try to get a feel for what best suits them. And I know the reopening committee has been working very, very hard to establish criteria or procedures for how this can happen. And so we're looking forward, many of us are looking forward to gathering together for our worship services, but you'll have a certain population that will continue to enjoy the services from the comfort of their homes, you might say. And I know that each Thursday now for the last year or so, our services have been pre-recorded so that they can be live streamed on Sunday. Now, this past week, I had the privilege of participating in preparation for Men's Day, and I was amazed at what it takes to produce that program for Sunday.
Talk about that. It's interesting.
Yeah. Well, technology. It's a lot of technology. There's a lot of know-how in terms of scripting things out, and I was amazed at Reverend Dr. Mills's husband, who leads that production team, and it's amazing the things that how he's able to put it together, I would say. And now, when we go to hybrid, that's going to be very interesting because many of the start and stops or redos that you might do for a virtual, you're not going to be able to do when you have your office, your audience or your congregation on site. So that's going to be a challenge, but I'm sure they'll rise to the occasion.
Has music been a big part of your worship life at Asbury?
Always. I go back to the days of Mark Fax on the organ. He was a renowned musician, of course, and we've had many, many great musicians. Asbury has always been known for its music. Right now, as you know, we have the great Everett P. Williams Jr., who is just phenomenal. And the music of Asbury has always been just fantastic. And so, of course, I have a tendency to like the old hymns, you might say. But of course, again, in trying to appeal to everyone and trying to present a variety of kinds of music. We don't always have the old hymns, but Brother Williams is doing a fantastic job, and everyone just loves him, and the skills and the expertise that he shares with us.
Particularly during this time of COVID, music has played a strong part. Would you agree?
Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes.
So as we come to a close, in an action-packed life, could just give some thought to what are the things you've done of which you think your parents would be most proud?
Well, I would think what I've been able to do academically, professionally, because they spent so much time and had such a great interest, and were so involved in Masonry and the Eastern Star. I would hope that they would be proud that I have followed in their footsteps and have held some of the same offices that they have held. I've always been very proud for what they've been able to achieve in their personal lives, and so I would hope that they would look kindly upon what I've tried to do and some of the things I've achieved.
Are those the things that you're most proud of as well? Do they match, do you think?
Yes, yes.
Yes. All right. What has been your greatest blessing?
Well, my greatest blessing, I think one of my greatest blessings has been to have lived as long as I have, and to have experienced good health. Many of my peers have not been as blessed. I am also thankful for my family, for my church family, my fraternal family, and many of the bonds that I've been able to build within those organizations. And I'd like to think that I've been able to help people, that I have been a good example that some would want to follow and emulate. And I hope to continue to be able to be of service and to be a good example.
Now, since you opened the door so that we could try to understand, do you mind sharing with us your birth date?
My birthday? When did I open that door?
When you said you've lived as long as you have. All you have to do is just, we just don't know how long that is.
I was born on August the 4th, 1944. I was 8 pounds and 12 ounces. And I believe I was born in the afternoon at Freedman's Hospital.
So you're in the middle of a good long life, and we appreciate it. Are there things to talk about that I haven't asked you?
Oh, I'm sure there are, but nothing that I can really think of off the top of my head. But I've enjoyed this time. I'm hoping that it's been meaningful and that someone will be able to draw some history and some understanding of how things have been through the years, through my experience.
Absolutely. We thank you so very much. I have enjoyed it as well. I thank you for your candor and for sharing the things that were on your mind and the things that I asked you about. And we look forward to sharing with you at our oral history culminating event, where you will come and talk with us and other panelists, other people who have agreed to do their narration with us and complete the sharing. Thank you, Dr. Yearwood.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I am now going to end the recording.